It's not as if we couldn't have predicted this, and it's not as if that, you know, the authorities haven't had time to have more ventilation and more spacing and whatever. I know it's a tough gig, but it's a big problem in spreading this awful virus. What's gone wrong, and what would you do to put it right?
No, I think that's exactly right. We have known for a very long time what was needed in order to drive down transmission of COVID in schools. It was 18 months ago that SAGE told us that ventilation and getting that right would be really important, and the government just haven't done that. You know, we had an announcement that there will be 9,000 purification units for classrooms, but we've got hundreds of thousands of classrooms across our country, and most of those devices won't be arriving until the end of February. So when I've been out visiting schools, and I've seen it for myself, head teachers have just been asked to prop open windows and doors in order to keep air circulating. But obviously it's pretty cold at the moment. We're in winter, and I think it is completely, incompetent and complacent of the government to imagine that it's, the answer is just to put children in their coats, expect them to keep on learning, and then open up windows. We need to see a lot more action from the government on ventilation if we're to really drive down the transmission of COVID in our classrooms.
Yeah, and the backstory to all of this is for every child that's stuck at home is enormous pressure, much like the pressure we saw when children were all out of school on the parents, most of whom have been told that it's safe now to go back to work from home has ended, and they're having to try and do their jobs as well as look after quite often sick children, and there are fears that there could be this second wave amongst parents. And again, anecdotally, my experience of this is that a lot of parents now are coming down with the virus because their kids have been sick.
So you're saying now we've had the wave with the kids, now the kids have passed it on to the parents, which gets it back into wider society again.
Yeah, so that's the fear. I mean, I don't know if that's something that you're concerned about.
I am concerned about the pressures on families because, our children have already missed, significant periods of time in school. This is the third year of disruption to their education. And that does, of course, mean that where children have to be at home because they have COVID, parents have got to stay home and look after them. And that's a real pressure on families. And this has been going on, of course, for a long time. What we haven't seen running alongside all of that, of course, is a proper plan from the government to make sure that our children are really at the heart of our recovery from the pandemic. Time and again, they've just been an afterthought. They've never been a priority. On the first day that schools were closed to most children, that was the day the government should have been planning for what came next. Instead, we had that report from the government's catch-up chief, Sir Kevin Collins, which the government effectively put in the bin and haven't delivered on. And it's our children and young people who are being let down and are not being given all the support they need to have a really, brilliant future and achieve all they can.
Yeah. Talking about reports and marking homework and that sort of thing, the Prime Minister gets to mark his own homework with Sue Gray in this report into what went on as regards Partygate. Are you itching as to when she will report, and have you any indication when that would be?
I think we all want to see it, of course we do, but the government shouldn't be hiding behind Sue Gray. The Prime Minister needs to take some responsibility. He's lied and lied and lied again. And to add to that, we've got this sorry spectacle of senior ministers, paraded out every day, coming up with an ever more ridiculous litany of excuses to justify the fact that when, schools were closed to most children, when they were at home, when our key workers were, working in intensive care, in supermarkets, keeping our country going, the Prime Minister, number 10, were organising boozy parties with a suitcase full of booze being wheeled in, and they're just taking the British people for fools if they think that we can't see that. We don't need Sue Gray to tell us what is absolutely plain and right in front of us.
What about those that say that we've lost all sense of proportion? There's possible war looming over in Ukraine. We've got a cost of living crisis, and here we are, all fretting about whether or not Boris Johnson was ambushed by a cake or not. And the idea that, the head of state should be interviewed under caution for something that would be punishable by a £100 fine is frankly
He's not
laughable.
The head of state. He's not king.
OK, head of the government, OK, the Prime Minister should be questioned, under caution for something that's punishable with a £100 fine. Lots of people would say is laughable.
I think integrity and high standards in public life really matter, and I think they matter to the British people. But I think, the fact that the government is so mired in scandal, spending all of their time consumed by seeking to defend the Prime Minister, means that they aren't taking the action that we need to see around the cost of living. We all know that gas and electricity bills have absolutely skyrocketed, that the prices in the shops, particularly for the basics, are much, much higher than they were, and that's placing real pressure on families. And that's why Labour's got a really clear plan as to how we deal with that. The government have had months to do something and haven't. What we're saying is that we should provide immediate support on heating bills right now by cutting VAT on gas and electricity bills, paying for that with a windfall tax on oil and gas producers in the North Sea. That's the kind of action we need to see from the government on tackling the cost of living. That's the kind of action we are not going to get for as long as they are focused on just getting through day to day, providing excuses for the Prime Minister. And I think the Chancellor in particular has to ask himself, how long is he prepared to put up with this, allow standards in our kind of institutions, in the office of Prime Minister, be so debased when he himself has every intention of trying to become Prime Minister once Boris Johnson is out of the way, and it really only is a matter of time. So, you know, Boris Johnson should just do the decent thing, get on with it and resign.
I just want to read you an email that's just come into us, on the subject of schools, just to go back to that, from one of our viewers saying, ask the Shadow Education Secretary what they've done with the with the Labour administration in Wales. If it's so much better than England, why have they had the same problems in schools as we've had here?
Well, of course, we know that when people are together in big numbers, you do risk the transmission of COVID. However, what the Welsh Labour government have done is put forward a much more ambitious plan around how we support our children to make up for all of that lost time. So that is a big difference between the government here in Westminster and the government in Wales, who also put in place lots more measures to support small businesses through a really difficult time and have taken a different approach and have actually got a really strong record in the way that they've responded. But, you know, it just comes back to the fact that we know what's needed to drive down transmission. That is around ventilation. It's also vaccination, and those rates remain still too low amongst eligible children. I mean, the last time I checked, it was around only 60% of 12 to 15-year-olds had even had their first jab. We know it's safe and effective, and the government should be doing a lot more to tackle those issues that we know will make a real difference in driving down transmission, and will keep our children in school where they absolutely need to be.
Also keeping staff safe as well, Bridget. What do you know about numbers of teaching staff and support staff who have been affected by this virus?
Yeah, we've seen big absence rates. I mean, it varies in different parts of the country, but big absence rates amongst staff who have absolutely gone above and beyond during the pandemic. I can't praise them more highly for all they've done, you know, to keep children learning, whether that was remote learning, but all of the school staff, you know, teachers and support staff who were going into schools, opening up during those very dark and early days of the pandemic to make sure that our children were able to learn. I mean, all too often they just felt that their work hasn't been recognised by the government. That's what I hear time and again when I visit schools. But it is really important that we drive down transmission rates, not just where it comes to children, but also for those staff in our schools who are working their socks off to make sure that our children get the best possible start in life.